Have you ever been watching Sailor Moon and found yourself thinking, this show is great and all, but wouldn't it be even better if the main character was transgender and Jewish? Well, let me tell you, I'm right there with you. My name's Leah Moser, and I'm asking you to help me publish my book, Magical Princess Harriet. Magical Princess Harriet is a young adult fantasy novel about a middle school-aged kid named Harris Baumgartner, who at the start of the book is doing his best to ignore the persistent feeling that he was never meant to be a boy. Then one day, on the way to school, he meets an angel in the abandoned construction site at the end of his street, and suddenly everything starts to change. To his dismay, he finds out that his school is inhabited by monsters, a brother and sister named Azrael and Cassadia. Then there's the awkward fact that the magical paper rose that the angel gave Harris to help him fight the monsters also happens to turn him into a full-blown magical princess, complete with dress and shiny tiara. But perhaps the scariest thing of all is that the little voice inside of him telling him that he is really a she is getting harder and harder to ignore. I started writing this book for two reasons. First, because I feel like there's a serious lack of books for young people that deal with transgender characters as anything other than a social issue to be educated about. I wanted to write an engaging story that deals with gender dysphoria and transition the way that actual transgender people experience them, as just one facet among many others in a rich, complicated, and interesting life. Harriet's process of coming to terms with her own gender identity is an important part of her story, but it's only one part. The same thing applies to Harriet's friend Frances, who, despite the fact that she happens to be autistic, refuses to let that fact limit what she can do or get in the way of making connections with the people she loves. Harriet and her friends' struggles with their identities influence them, but don't completely define who they are or what they can accomplish in life. And that's something I see as both true to life and an important lesson to be learned. The second reason I wanted to write this book was because of an article I read way back when I was first studying to become Jewish. It was in the Jewish Review of Books, and the article was called Why There Is No Jewish Narnia. The author makes some good points about the way fantasy as a genre has often tended toward romantic nostalgia for a medieval past that was never quite so romantic for the Jews. At the same time, I felt then, as I feel now, that there's no reason that a culture that produced such vibrant mystical texts as the Zohar, or such imaginative folklore as the tale of the Golem of Prague, shouldn't be a rich source of inspiration for fantasy fiction. Magical Princess Harriet is deeply influenced by Jewish mythology and mysticism, which are things I spent a lot of time learning about when I was studying to be a rabbi. Magical Princess Harriet is my attempt to create a Jewish Narnia. That is, a fun, exciting fantasy novel that happens to be grounded in Jewish tradition rather than C.S. Lewis's Christianity. Does that mean that you have to be Jewish to enjoy this novel? No way. I loved reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe growing up, and I still do today, even though I don't share the religious convictions of the author. Fantasy fiction can be a great way to engage with people from cultures different from our own, because there's something about a well-told story that speaks to all of us, no matter what our identity happens to be. You don't have to be Jewish, transgender, autistic, or anything else to enjoy Magical Princess Harriet, because above all, it's a fun story about a sweet kid and her friends trying their best to cope with a bizarre situation they find themselves in, and that's something that anyone can relate to. I'm running this Kickstarter in order to get together the funds that I need in order to publish Magical Princess Harriet and make it the beautiful, professional quality book that I want it to be. When it's published early on next year, you'll be able to find it in both paperback, and ebook formats on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and iBooks, among others. If you want to know more about the budget, you can find that information in the Kickstarter description below. But basically, I need the money to pay the illustrator, an amazing artist named Magda Zwierchowska, as well as a number of other expenses related to getting the book ready for printing, such as ISBNs, barcodes, and things like that. If you think that you might be interested in reading about Harriet and her friends' adventures, then please consider supporting my project and telling other people about it. It would be a big help. Thanks very much.